Ever wish you could find a circle of successful business owners who just openly share what they did to get where they are? Challenges, perspectives, tough decisions, the good, the bad, the strategies, what worked and what definitely didn't? Because if you could, that would make your journey as CEO of your own small business 1,000,000 times easier and less lonely. Welcome to Reaching Abundance. This is the only podcast where you get weekly cliff notes about developing mental fortitude from successful business owners who have positioned their podcast as the marketing arm of their business. I'm your host, Virginia Elder, fellow business owner and abundance enthusiast. Listening to this show will help you step up, play big, avoid pitfalls, and shift into a growth mindset as you build and market your business and pursue your own definition of abundance. During this interview episode, you'll hear recommendations for online tools, learn which metrics to track in your business, how to find and hire your next mentor or coach, and what to do if you're starting to feel burned out. Amy Traugh, business strategist, best-selling author of The CEO Method, and host of the Motivated CEO podcast, reveals details about shutting down her first business, structuring a new business to support her definition of abundance, and what the processes and decisions looked like for launching a podcast and later writing a book. Her business has accelerated quickly during the past few years, and I am excited for you to gather all of the evidence in this episode as to why, so you can then apply it to your business. Amy, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so excited to chat with you as well and see where this conversation takes us.
Absolutely. Start us off, if you will please share with me what your definition of abundance is.
Currently, abundance to me looks like having my proverbial cup so full of joy that I pour out and can make a positive impact on others to help them live the life that they truly desire. This has evolved over time. I used to think that abundance was, just having enough money to one day comfortably retire. That to me was like, okay, when I reach that point, then I'm going to start living. But what I realized is no. I can make today day one of my journey. And that's what I did over 4 years ago. I made that commitment and started living for today, living a life that is truly abundant. And now I get to truly impact others.
So what does that look like for you when you say your cup is so full that you get to impact others? Go into that a little bit deeper and tell us how you get your cup so full. What does that mean?
Yeah, it really involved pausing, being intentional, and asking myself some really tough questions. I was going through life on autopilot. And one day I realized, what? Everything in this world, nothing is guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. So I had to really go in and redefine, what do I truly want out of this life? And is my life currently supporting that? And it was in working through that, and it was not a pretty process. The journey of entrepreneurship, it's hard. It's a lot of the inner work that, as much as we don't want to admit it, we have to confront those parts of us that we may have pushed down. But once you have that self-awareness as to what do you actually want, are you truly living in alignment with what you say you want? And then why do you really want it? Once you have that crystal clear vision, then you can reverse engineer anything. That's where the strategy piece comes in. And I feel like the strategy is almost the easy part. It's uncovering that self-awareness. That's the challenge.
Tell me about the difference between what you thought success was as a business owner and then after you paused. Maybe give us the where you were, why you were maybe stressed out or at burnout, or what that situation was and why, and then how that changed.
Yeah. So I actually come from a career in healthcare. I worked for 16 years in outpatient physical therapy. I mean, I had my license, I had my credentials. I worked so hard for that degree. But what I realized is I was going through life checking boxes. I was going through life living on someone else's terms of success. But when I really got honest with myself and said, you know what I truly love about my job is empowering and educating others. It was then that I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to bet on myself and start my first business. I had no clue what I was doing at the time. But the really cool thing is all of the information is out there. There are wonderful mentors. There's so much support. The internet is a beautiful place. You need to make sure you're using a trustworthy source, but you can gain skills to propel you to the success that you desire. So once I learned, then it was a matter of implementing. It was a matter of getting out of my own way, being crystal clear, like we talked about, and taking action. I took messy action and I grew that business. And then I found myself starting to teach others how to do the same thing. And I was like, wait a minute, I am now doing what I did my whole career in physical therapy. We're setting a goal, we're reverse engineering it, and we're taking steps then to achieve that goal. And we're reassessing along the way. Because you can figure it out as you go through, as you're learning, you have to implement. And I think that's the missing piece for so many entrepreneurs. We get so stuck in our heads. And believe me, I have been to those points where it's like, okay, what am I going to do? And this is where I really had to pause with that first business. It was like, this has grown so much, but I'm also really impacting so many other lives. I'm doing this, almost coaching and consulting in a way. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but I didn't have the capacity for both. So it was taking that pause to determine, what do I really want, and letting go of something that was actually very profitable in order to grow this other business. So it feels counterintuitive, and it's not easy to make those decisions when it comes down to it. But in letting go, I opened up so many opportunities and the space to truly grow as a business owner.
Okay, so you started a business.
Yeah, it grew fast.
Ended up pausing that business and then starting a different one. Am I tracking that?
Yeah, I know. It's
Okay.
a wild ride.
Walk us through the decisions there. With that first business, did you say, I actually don't like doing this work anymore, I want to shift into a different space? Like, what was the reasoning there, and how did you arrive at this idea of the new business?
The biggest reason was I didn't like the travel. It was a residential organizing company. I loved helping people get rid of the clutter, really to make that time and space for what matters most. And I loved it. I got so much joy out of that because you have that transformation. You help others create this environment that supports them, because our physical environment really does have an impact on our mental status as well. When our environments are very visually cluttered, it puts more clutter in our mind. I loved what I did. I didn't love the travel. And so I did some virtual organizing services, but it wasn't the same. I had to pause and ask myself, okay, what is my next step? Do I want to scale this? Do I want to go down the route where I have multiple subcontractors working so I don't have to travel as much? How can I go about solving this? And what do I really want? At the end of the day, what do I really want? And it was at that point that I'm like, you know what? As much as I love doing this, I am loving helping others grow their businesses. I'm loving growing this business. I'm loving the marketing, the mindset, the transformation of building the business and empowering others to do the same. And what I realized was, oh wait, that's what I loved about my first career. I loved helping others achieve their version of success. It's not about me. It's about, what are your goals? What's important to you? And how can I hold your hand, link arms with you to get you there? Because mentorship is so key. It helps us identify those blind spots in our business. And to this day, I still have a mentor. It's just so great to have somebody that doesn't have that emotional attachment to our business, that can really help us get out of our heads and navigate this crazy world of entrepreneurship. So to me, it was really about getting honest with myself and asking, what do I really want? And realizing, you know what? That first business, it was not a failure. If I hadn't had that first business, I wouldn't have found my true passion that married all of those years of experience plus the business and led me to where I am right now.
Absolutely. And that was one of the questions that was popping into my mind was, what are some of the biggest lessons or keys that you were able to go, okay, these are different businesses. This is coaching and helping other people grow. That was organization. This was like a physical job, whereas this is more speaking and teaching and probably a lot of virtual coaching, I'm assuming. Very different businesses, right? But I'm sure there were some very key lessons, whether they be file organization or finance organization, how to work your business finances. I'm sure there were things that translated over. So could you share with us some of those?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing, and this is something business owners miss out on all the time, is having a solid tracking system in place. Data drives our decisions as business owners. And 99% of the time, we're not paying as close attention to our numbers as we need to be. That data in our business tells a story. And when I start working with clients, a lot of times they're like, but I'm not a numbers person. Well, guess what? I'm not either. It's okay. You don't have to be. What we're simply doing is pulling key points, and we're starting simple. We're not starting with everything in the kitchen sink. And we're going to figure out a system that works for you. Because 1 month in time is just a snapshot. But what we really want to dive into is seeing those trends. Where are those natural ebbs and flows of your business over the course of a quarter, 6 months, of a year? And that helps us strategically make decisions that will propel our business forward. So we can lean into parts of our business that are profitable and let go of the pressure of trying to do all of the things. Also, often I see people putting so much time and energy into social media when that is really not converting. I love my podcast. That is my long form content from which every single piece of content flows. So what my podcast has done is it allows me to work smarter instead of harder. I have regained control of my time. I have regained control of my energy. I am now more strategic with how and where I'm showing up because a podcast has longevity. I still get downloads on episodes that I published last year. Social media, I don't even get likes on things that I posted last week. So for me, having a podcast really, really makes sense from that business perspective. But getting back to what you originally said with some of those other lessons learned, it's all about systems and automations, really having that structure in our business. Structure is what leads to the freedom that we all desire. And a lot of times when people hear the word structure, they're like, but that's not fun. That's not the fun stuff. That's not, posting and traveling and doing all the fun things. But structure is what gives you freedom because now you're not having to be in your business, making decisions day in and day out, so frazzled, so fatigued, it allows you to build your business that supports your life, that you get to control, that feels good and allows you to live a life of abundance.
Yeah. And I know several entrepreneurs who are like, oh, I started this business to do what I want, when I want. And they're definitely throwing that structure piece kind of out the window. But you have to have structure when it comes to files, finances, client organization. Like you can't be managing clients, like in my case, their recordings, show notes, all the podcast graphics, all of that stuff, and have it disorganized. That would not be cool.
Right.
So,
Right. Because think about it. If you're disorganized in your business, you're potentially losing leads. You're losing information. So then at tax time, you're having to spend all this extra time getting all the information for your CPA to do your taxes. It creates more stress. So yes, it is a little bit of work up front. And I always encourage clients to review those workflows at least quarterly to see if there's other additional opportunities for automation within their business, which will again save you time. This is the part that's not fun for most people, but is the key.
so do you have any favorite tools or specific recommendations that you want to share for some of this organization? Maybe your favorite CRM, or you mentioned automations.
Yeah. So I am a firm believer in try it before you buy it. Because it works for me, it may not work for you. So that is absolutely key, that you dive in and kind of see in the back end what these different platforms look like. Oftentimes, we need to just start simple.
Have you ever pictured yourself hosting your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we'd like to do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs and business owners launch and grow podcasts since 2019. I coach you through branding, establishing structure and workflow, and recording your episodes. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for your potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show.
When you're just starting out in business, you don't need all the fancy CRMs out there. Yeah, they're nice to have, but could you be investing those monies into something else that would move the needle forward? I use Google Sheets all the time. It's shared with members of my team so that information just plug and play. And then I love Zapier to connect apps that aren't connected to each other. So say, for example, somebody fills in an intake form for a new client that automatically goes into a Google Sheet, triggers an automation. Okay, there's this new client. We need to send out the onboarding information, triggers the contract. Everything is on autopilot and it works beautifully. So Zapier is kind of my hidden tool that everyone can use and have access to. And it's free up to a certain number of, they're called zaps. So those little automation triggers per month. But start simple. If you're curious to see what do these different tools look like on the back end, would this work for me? Go into YouTube and just start typing in some of the different things you're interested in. And you can see kind of behind the scenes, you can see people doing tutorials so you can determine if that tool is appropriate for your business, because these are tools. They're meant to help us. And if we're using ones that are so overly complicated, what are we going to do? we're going to start using it as a weapon. We're not actually going to be leveraging that tool to help us grow our business. And we're going to get so overwhelmed that we're back at square one. So my best advice is just to keep it simple. Business is nothing more than an experiment. You're trying and figuring out what is going to work for you.
One thing I want to circle back to that you mentioned a while ago was mentors. And now, as a coach, I'm sure you're a mentor to many, many business owners, but you've had coaches and you still have a coach today. Take us back to like the baby steps of your business. At what point did you hire your first coach? What specifically were you looking for? How do we know what to look for in a coach? Are there specific questions we should be asking when we're starting to explore that arena? Because I agree with you, we all need some help. But I think finding the right coach for you at your stage with expertise in the thing that's where you want to go is so important. And for me, the missing piece in many coaches' backgrounds is where is that successful business that they grew that you're going to teach me based on, right? Sometimes I cannot find where the heck they got this experience. It's like they just woke up one day and decided they were going to coach business people. So talk us through how to find a good coach and your journey with finding your good coaches.
Yeah. I've made a lot of good decisions and I've made some bad hires over the years. But day one, I knew I needed someone in the corner to help me build a business because I had never done it before. That's when I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start with the low-hanging fruit. I didn't have a huge budget. So I actually utilized something called SCORE. And that is a free mentorship community through the Small Business Administration. It's usually retired business owners. So I figured who better to help me with the foundational aspects of business. So I started there. I started free. And this is nationwide. So you as a business owner have access to this. And I still remember Mike. Mike was my mentor. Mike was like this 75-year-old man. And bless his heart, I still remember day one, he was like, okay, we're going to start with a business plan. I'm like, but that's not what I want to do. I want to go and I want to market and I want to get myself out there. He's like, no, you need a business plan. And I still remember like rolling my eyes at him. But looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, he was absolutely right. Because now this is what I do with clients. I'm like, we need a plan. We need to have that clarity in our business as to our mission, our morals, our values, how we're marketing, our sales plan, our marketing plan. All of this needs to be out of our head and onto paper. So, Mike, if you were listening to this, I am so sorry that I rolled my eyes and gave you a hard time. And when I got to the point where I was like, you know what? We've done what we can do. I'm ready to look to where do I want to go next in my business? Who can I partner with that has achieved what I desire? I started going on LinkedIn. I started looking for those who were where I wanted to be. And I didn't go to social media because I feel like social media, it's very easy to throw anything up there. It's very easy to be like, oh, I just made 20K in a week. Like, I just made 50K in a day. You can say anything and you don't have to have any credibility, any credentials to back it up. So what did I do? I went to their websites. I went and I dug in to really see what is their process? What does it look like? And 99% of the time, if they had a podcast, I was like, you know what? I'm going to that podcast. I want to know that they have the credibility, that they really know what they're talking about. Every single mentor I hired from there moving forward had a podcast, but I was really clear as to, okay, what do I need in my business? And are they the right investment to get there? Because there's a gamut of mentors out there. You can have ones that are charging very little. There are mentors that are charging 5 figures. You have to figure out who is going to be the best fit for you. Get into their world, consume their information on the podcast Don't worry about the whole social media thing. Social media is great for discoverability, but really to unpack the meat of it, go and listen to their podcast. Go and see where they're speaking. That will give you more insight to as if you know if it'll be a good fit. And sometimes you may make mistakes, and that's okay. That's okay. We all like to trust our gut, but sometimes you just make a wrong decision, and that's okay. It teaches you something. So if you can gain a lesson then from that experience, it was still worth it. So for me, leverage those podcasts. So again, going back to the whole podcasting thing.
I was going to say, so that leads us perfectly into why did you start a podcast? When in your entrepreneurial journey did you start your podcast? And what was your thought process at that time? Was it because you hired coaches based on their podcast and you thought, oh, great, this is amazing credibility. I want to do that too. Talk to us about those very early days, which I know, Amy, is for a long time ago for you. But tell us how that process worked and why you initially launched your own show.
Yeah. So I was 2 years into business before it even crossed my mind to start a podcast. First, I had someone say, you should start a podcast. I'm like, I don't know, maybe one day. I don't know enough. We put those excuses up there. I kept hearing people say, hey, you should start a podcast over and over. And so I started researching. I'm like, okay, well, is it really that complicated? And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off and do it because from the outside looking in, what is everyone that I'm hiring? What do they have? They have a podcast. So if I'm looking to attract similar clients, why don't I have a podcast? And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to see if I like it. So I just bought the cheap Yeti mic at first. And I'm like, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to try, twice a week for 3 months and we'll see how it goes. Oh my gosh, I loved it. I absolutely loved the conversations, the networking, the ability to just find my voice because it's so hard in a 90-second reel or, whatever these things are to put all that information. I have a lot to say. I want to shout it from the rooftops. And what better way to build that visibility, to build that credibility, to build the authority, to be a leader in my space than a podcast? And it's really cool reflecting back on the journey to look at where I started and where I am now. I listen back to some of those early episodes and it just makes me cringe. But at the same time, it makes me appreciate the journey that, you know what? I got out of my own way and I just said yes to myself. So now that I have done so, I can impact others even more. And it's just so cool. It is so cool, the opportunities that it has provided me by just being willing to be a beginner and just start.
Yeah. One of my posts just this week was you're never going to look more professional if you don't start at whatever stage you are, right? You cannot grow within that professional look or, the professional podcaster or whatever it is. You cannot get there unless you start somewhere. So even if you feel I don't know what I'm doing, I, haven't quite found my voice. I've heard that before. Different phrases that we say that are really just barriers from just starting. Like you said, just get the cheap mic, start creating some content. No matter what, you're going to cringe when you look at those first episodes. I cringe when I look at my first episodes, and I'm a professional podcast manager. It's just going to happen. You cannot escape past that.
Right, exactly. It's just as we're growing up, we have to go through that awkward stage of adolescence. It's part of the journey. And we forget that everybody started at ground zero. We love to compare ourselves with everyone else's journey, these really successful names in the online space. Well, guess what? There was a time when no one knew Oprah. There was a time when no one knew Tony Robbins Like all of these big names out there, there was a time that they were you and I, but they were like, you know what? Nope, I'm just going to do it. I am going to just step out there because I know I have an impact to make.
Yeah. I know over the several years that you've had your show, things have changed and grown. You have a team now.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the impact that podcasting made on your business and walk us through kind of how you started to build out your team, whether it be, okay, these people serve clients and these people do the podcast and these people do the socials, or like how have you chosen to build this out?
I really had to build out because I knew that there was such potential there. It all goes back to reverse engineering. I knew I wanted to grow my visibility. So how am I going to do that? Okay, well, podcasting is a great way to become more visible because what I'm doing is I'm connecting with others. A lot of times then they'll share out the episode. So that's increasing my visibility. That's increasing my listenership. So back in Q1 of 2023, decided, you know what, we're going all in on this podcast because we were starting to see, this was about 6 months into the podcasting journey. We were starting to see those tangible results. It was giving the conversions. It was helping my sales. It was growing my business. It was amplifying my voice. It was having all of these tangible results that we're seeing on paper. So I'm like, you know what? We're going to go 5 days a week with this podcast, but I cannot do this on my own. So I hired out. That's when I started building my team. And we started simple. I didn't always have a video podcast. I started audio only. I didn't have a whole production team. I just had somebody on the back end doing the audio, doing the editing, and then my VA was doing my graphics. So it goes back to being organized, having those systems and automations in place, and just doing it. And by putting in the reps, by having that high volume at the beginning, it really amplified my visibility in the best way. But I say this with a caveat. I had that team supporting me. I could not have done that on my own. So it was being willing to see, okay, in my business, what is working, and being willing to take the risk and make the investment into that team so that I could do what I did best. And that was being the voice of the brand, being behind the mic. Editing, that's not my zone of genius. Graphics, not my zone of genius. But what could I do? I could talk to people. I once did the math and I treated over 60,000 patients over my career in healthcare. 60,000. So I knew how to talk to people. I could talk to anyone about anything. But I didn't have those tech skills. I didn't want to put the time into something that wasn't going to have the return on investment. So once I determined, oh my gosh, I can't afford not to not hire this person. Like, I need this if this is the route I'm going to go. And I just did it. Being an entrepreneur, we have to be willing to take risks, very calculated risks, but it does involve stepping outside of your comfort zone, acknowledging that fear and going, you know what? I've got an empire to build and I'm going to do it. Even though to everyone else, it may not make sense. It makes sense to me, and let's just go for it.
Yeah. And that is one of my soapboxes is as a business owner, I really don't want you learning how to edit audio, video, creating your graphics. Like, sure, know enough to just like be a little bit dangerous, as we say, because just in a pinch, you might have to do something.
Right.
But for the most part, editing doesn't make you money. So yes, 100% as a business owner, I even want you facing clients, doing things that are money-making activities. So whether that is doing a live because you're attracting an audience in and everybody's signing up for your free thing, whether it's writing a book because this is what's generating attention to your brand right now, whatever it is, I want all business owners focused on that money-making activity and to really do the eval like you did. Think, okay, what can I do where I must be involved in this process versus what can someone else do while I turn around and look toward the money-making activity, right? So talk to us now about what do you spend your time on that are these client-facing, forward-facing, visionary activities as a business owner. Basically, you're sharing with us where we should be focusing our energy.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I have gotten to the point where I adopt the rule, if it falls below my hourly rate, I'm going to outsource it because my time and my energy are so valuable to me. And it's so counterintuitive. The first few years of business are a lot of work. And for anyone that's like, no, it's not, you can just manifest it. Like, you still have to put in the action. Yes, you can visualize all day long. You can manifest anything. Okay, that's fine. That's dandy. But you have to put in the action. And it's a lot of work in the beginning. But the bigger my business has grown, the more successful it's become, the more time I have because I'm so laser focused during those times of what do I need to get done. So for me right now, my main focus is building relationships with others because I can't outsource that. I don't want to outsource that. So I'm building relationships with people that are hosting events so that I can get my book into swag bags in front of my ideal clients. I'm putting my effort into creating amazing content on the podcast because podcasting is always evolving. And the way I do my podcast now looks different than it did when I started. And I love being able to play and analyze those results. But it feels a little weird. I'm not going to lie. It feels different because I've totally changed up the way I'm doing the introductions, the promotion, like a lot of things are changing. What I'm doing then is tracking the data. I also am very intentional with taking the time on my schedule monthly to assess those numbers. As the CEO of our business, it is essential that in order to start acting like the CEO and not just an employee, you need to have that structure in place where you're looking at the trends over time. You're looking at that story that we talked about in the beginning, that story that the data is telling you. So you can figure out, okay, I'm moving forward, but am I moving closer to my goal or am I barreling forward in the wrong direction? Because we are human. We have feelings, we have emotions, and we should. That's a beautiful thing. But what the data does is it gives you an objective measure. So now you can get out of your head. You realize, okay, these are just numbers. These are nothing to be afraid of. They're actually there to help me make better decisions so that I can grow my business and impact even more lives. So for me, my time is spent doing things that I can't pay someone else to do, that I love doing to support others. So being the forward face of the brand, creating that podcast content, and really building those relationships. That's where I'm spending my time. It's nothing complicated. And of course, doing client forward-facing activities, really being there to serve my clients.
Yeah. And then you mentioned data, and we talked about it a little bit earlier with tools and tips and tracking and staying organized. Could you share some data metrics that you recommend we all keep an eye on? And I know it changes per business, but give us just some ideas, just in case somebody is hearing this and going, oh, well, okay, great data, but like what numbers? Where do I go? What do I look for? Can you tell us?
Yes. Okay. So there's two that really stand out to me. If you are just getting started with this, first one, I want you to track what's actually selling. Where is that revenue coming in from? Double down on that. Stop trying to be everywhere for everyone all the time. Sell to one person with one problem over and over and over until you get that on autopilot. Stop trying to do all of the things. Figure out where your clients are coming in from. Focus there. Focus on the one thing. One of my favorite books by Gary Keller, The One Thing, highly recommend it. Also, it was probably about 2 months ago on another podcast, and I wish I could quote it. I wish I could cite it because I can't remember where I heard it. And I found this fascinating. track your total audience. So we're talking, if you have a podcast, I want you to write down all of your downloads. If you have a YouTube channel, add in your YouTube count, add in your email list subscribers, add in your social media followers, add in anywhere that you are getting followers to see your total reach. And then what you can do is compare that, start trending it month to month. I did this last month. I did that this month. And I was feeling a little disappointed. I'm like, gosh, my email list just didn't grow as much as I thought it would this month. I was really starting to get into my head, but my total audience grew by 7%. That is huge. That is huge in terms of business. 7% growth. Are you kidding me? So I found that is a really cool metric to start to track, is that total overall reach. So any of your channels that you're on, podcast, YouTube, social media following, email list, total it all up, and then start to trend it over time. And you'll start to see your reach is a lot bigger than you may think. Because how often are we like, oh, my list isn't big enough. I just need a bigger list. Oh, I need more followers. I need more. So we get so wrapped up, so discouraged. But by looking at the overall growth, it's like, oh, I'm doing okay. Like, I don't need to worry about this nearly as much. So I heard that metric and I'm like, nope, we're totally using this and implementing it. And it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I love that. So I think the challenge with some business owners, I don't know if it's the male dominated like finance world, or I don't know what it is, but we tend to look at revenue, number of clients, maybe some numbers of like followings and things, which you did touch on. Thank you for sharing about that. Are there other numbers that are potentially like inside our CRM or inside QuickBooks that you would recommend we track besides those kind of top line revenue numbers?
I always want clients to know, what are your operating expenses? What is that bare minimum overhead number? Because this is another thing that I see in the online space a lot. We talked about how a lot of coaches, they'll gloat and they'll lead with the money. Like, I made $120,000 on my launch. I'm always thinking that analytical Amy is thinking, okay, but what was your profit margin? Like, how much did you actually spend on ads? How much was your team supporting you during this launch? What was your take home? Because a lot of times we're assuming that, oh my gosh, they made $120,000 on one launch. Okay, but you got to remember, taxes are coming out of that. A team is behind that. There's typically an ad spend behind that. Like, what is your take home? So I want you to know at all times, what is your overhead monthly? So all of those expenses, all the little things here and there, all those subscriptions that you have need to be tracked so that you know, okay, yeah, I'm having to pay for something like Zoom. I'm having to pay for my Google business account. I'm having to pay for all of these little platforms here and there. May not seem like a lot of money because most of them are only like 100 and some a year. But then you break that down per month and you add all those up and you realize, oh, okay, this is how much I need to make to break even before I even start making money. And then from that money, you've got to take the taxes out, or else at the end of the year, you're going to hit some pretty hefty fines and penalties. So it's so important to really have an awareness of your numbers, to have someone in your corner, a very good CPA that is there to help you navigate that cash flow as it's going in and out. Because I certainly do not have an accounting degree. I want someone that is very knowledgeable and on top of all of the taxes all of the time, because it's always changing. So it's very important that you know your overhead, you know what those operating expenses are. And again, it's something that we don't like to track. It's not fun to track, but it is essential to being profitable in your business.
Really good advice. Thank you. And I know on the surface, it's like almost basic.
Right.
It's like, shouldn't you know this from day one? But
so many people don't.
Yeah. And you see these big flashy social media posts like what you're saying. And that is always my thought. I'm like, oh, okay. I think we're supposed to think you're making, 120K like every time you launch, which would be however much per year, however many times you launched. But what's actually going on behind the scenes? It's like, okay, you made 100 and whatever on the launch, but your team support, ads, software, membership, vault, whatever, all the things that you're paying for cost 100K. So really all you had left over was 20K.
Yeah.
Or just something like that. And so don't believe all the flashy stuff that's on the internet or on your social media, especially. Let's take this over into the podcast space. Are there any specific metrics that you really focus in on as far as your podcast goes, or as far as your book, if you want to talk about that? Like, what are some other things we should be aware of as we are trying to get the word out about our business? Let's say who's listening does start a podcast or they just started it. What should they be looking at?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about getting curious. So what I'll do is I'll go into my podcast analytics and see what episodes are people downloading the most. And this gives me some really interesting data because now I can figure out, okay, was it how I worded the title? Was it the length of the episode? Was it a solo episode? Was it a guest episode? Where are listeners starting to fall off? You can go into Apple Connect for podcasters and Spotify for podcasters and see the length of time that people are actually listening. So okay, do I need to make my episodes shorter? Do I need to make them longer? What are my listeners resonating with? Because at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's about serving my listeners with what they need. And then what I do is I utilize social media as a platform to connect with them, to further engage from the podcast. Because podcasts, we're starting to see some different tools for our audience to engage with us, but it's not really seamless. Social media, people are familiar with it. They know how to go into the DMs and connect with you. They know how to find you and get a hold of you. Heck, I'm still trying to figure out how some of these new tools in the podcasting world are working as well. But it's really cool where it's going because it's a two-way street. But what we can do is we can view it as an experiment and get curious as to what's working. Well, why did that work? How can I do more of that, of what's working versus throwing spaghetti at the wall, doing all the things and not really having any understanding of what actually is working? So dive into those analytics that are provided for you. Start there and get curious as to what's working and double down.
Yeah. And one of the top questions I get as a podcast manager is, how long should my episodes be? How often should I interview someone, right? Like there's kind of a bag of questions that I field all the time, over and over.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is, when we're looking at analytics, you have to have a wide range of episodes to even have analytics from. So this goes back to the thing we talked about earlier, where you just have to start. You have to start somewhere so that you have a year's worth of episodes to analyze, to even figure out, oh, my people like my solo episodes more than my interviews, or like whatever the thing is. Even when you get that information, let's say that was your conclusion, that your audience liked your solo episodes more, that doesn't necessarily mean stop interviewing people completely, never be on another podcast, just go all solo all the time.
Right.
Because then what you might see is it's almost like a lack of networking within the podcast space. So when we interview someone, it is a form of networking in this podcast world that can't really be duplicated any other way. You and I have had a couple of conversations now, but we wouldn't have gotten to if it weren't for being featured on each other's shows. So that's truly a gift, right? That is available to all of us as podcasters. Starting somewhere, again, is going to be so important. You have zero data to analyze, and what's your conclusion based on your data is going to be different than my conclusion based on my data and someone else's data. Every audience doesn't react to lengths of episodes, solo versus interview, different segments like games or quotes from a book or whatever kind of cool thing that you want to implement in your show. Everyone's audience reacts different. And so you actually need your own data, which means you just got to get started somewhere. So I think that's the lesson for today.
Exactly. It's as simple as that. It's so simple that it's complicated, right?
Yes, because the thing is, with starting a business, with starting a podcast, with writing a book, whatever it is you want to do, there's this tendency of, but I want to do it right. And so you have all these questions about how to do it right. And all of that time that you spend researching, questioning, pausing, being scared, whatever it is that you're doing is preventing you from just getting started.
Yeah, exactly.
With that, Amy, tell us a little snippet about how podcasting has actually created more abundance in your life. And don't forget to mention your amazing book, where to get it, how to get it, why we need it, all of those good things.
Yeah. So, how podcast has created more abundance? It's created more connections. It is the most powerful networking tool. I have been able to connect with some of my dream mentors, all because I had a podcast. Authors of some of my favorite books, because I'm like, hey, would you like to come on as a guest? I know that you're launching this thing. Come on in and talk about it. So it all starts with just taking action, being willing to put yourself out there, make the ask, and seeing what happens. So podcasting for me has allowed me then to pour into others. It goes back to my definition of abundance because my cup is so full. Now I get to share my trials, tribulations, lessons learned along the ways, and knowledge with others. It helps me amplify my reach. It helps me reach new listeners that I would have never been able to connect with. You look at our social organic reach is so low, but podcasting is constantly expanding. So for me, the podcast is abundance because it fills me with even more joy because I'm creating even more impact. And then the book. So back in March, I published my first book called The CEO Method, an Entrepreneur's Guide to Business Success. Let me tell you, I never intended to write a book, but sometimes life just keeps giving you signals, just like that happened with the podcast. I kept getting, these little like nudges. I'm like, okay, I'll just try it, whatever. Same thing with the book. What happened was I kept getting these signs that, okay, you should write a book. You should write a book. Finally, I'm like, okay, I'll just write it. I'll just write the darn thing. I wrote it. I published it. It became a bestseller. It's the most humbling thing ever. And as my gift to you for being here today, for being a loyal listener of this podcast, I would love to gift you a copy. So if you just visit amytraugh.com/freebook, you can grab one completely for free. And what it does is it outlines my signature framework that I lead clients through, the CEO method. First, we dive into clarity, really unpacking what exactly you want for your life and business. Then we get into the nitty-gritty, establishing those systems, automations, and workflows. Finally, we get into organic marketing and sales strategy to really help you have a plan in place to generate the consistent sales that you want so that you can break through those sales plateaus. And we wrap it all up by talking about the most important part, taking action and implementation, because knowledge is worthless without implementation. You have to apply all of the knowledge that you gain. So it really takes you through my entire process. Yeah, grab your copy, take what you need, leave the rest. But maybe there's one thing in there that'll be the game changer. Maybe you'll find that missing piece that you've been searching for. But make sure to take action and implement because you have the solution to the problem that someone has. So it is your responsibility to share it. So go grab it, risk-free, no obligation. And my goal is just, again, to share my abundance, to share that impact with you so that you can create the impact that you desire.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, a free book. Y'all, do not pass this up. That is amazing. And then thank you for outlining what's in the book and how it can help us. I definitely think it will apply to any business owner wherever you are in your journey. Just because you're already making 6 or 7 figures doesn't mean that you can't use a refresher. So definitely don't pass up that opportunity for a free book. And in general, I am such a reader and such a consumer of like business and finance and self-help books. So this is right up my alley. Thank you so, so much. Amy, I really appreciate you being here with us today. Where can we find you and follow you aside from that book? Tell us that URL one more time, and then where can we find you?
Yeah, the free book, you can grab it at amytraugh.com, traugh.com/free book. The best place to connect with me, head on over to my podcast. I believe in cutting the fluff and giving you tangible tactics that you can implement today that will move the needle forward. And then I'm most active over on Instagram at Amy Traugh. So listen to an episode and then drop in my DMs. Let me know that you heard me over here. That just, as a podcaster, when you take the time to reach out and connect with us, I don't know about you, Virginia, but it just fills me with even more joy. It is so cool just hearing that, oh my gosh, something I said resonated. It made an impact in your life. So come say hi. It's really me in the DMs. I can't figure out ManyChat, so I'm a real person. I'm not an automation over there.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of automations and systems, I did try ManyChat for a while. I could not get it to sound like me. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I just couldn't figure it out. So same. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And everybody, make sure you grab your free book. You are not going to want to pass this up. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Virginia.
As this episode comes to a close, I'd love to know which piece of this conversation made an impact on you. Send a message to me at reachingabundance.com/convo. For your convenience, the link is in the episode description. This show is edited and published on YouTube and all podcast apps by podcastabundance.com, and we are taking clients. When you're ready to effectively and efficiently market your business using a podcast, book a call with me by clicking the Book a Call link in the episode description. Thank you for spending your time with me and listening to Reaching Abundance. I'm your host, Virginia Elder. I'll be back next week with another amazing guest to help you build your business, navigate mindset shifts, establish growth-oriented habits, and effectively leverage online marketing. In the meantime, keep up with me and my guests on Instagram at Podcast Abundance.